Hello, welcome to our session of Aruba ClearPass and AOS8 integration video series. Today we will do the use case number 3, Aruba AOS8 guest Wi-Fi Cutting Portal login with the server initiated workflow. The firmware release, we are using the same firmware as in this entire series. The VMC will be 8606 and ClearPass will be 693. This is a physical network diagram for your reference, just in case you want to replicate this one into your own lab and you want to know what could be the physically setup look like. Logical network diagram to show L2 and L3 connectivity, so it is very useful during the lab setup when we want to refer into the IP address, planning, naming convention, SSID name or things like that, right? So basically, for each group, you will have each of the partner SE who join this hand-on session. You will have 2 CPPM, 1 VMM, and 2 VMC. And for the AP, you have 1 dedicated AP under managed by the VMM and VMC. To do this configuration, you just need to RDP to your jump host. So make sure that you RDP to your correct jump host, right? Okay, so now we are moving to the server initiated workflow. So this one it have a little bit different compared to the controller initiated workflow that you see in the previous session, the part 2A use case 2. From the user experience, it is the same, right? The difference is actually the things happen behind. Now let's jump into the detail. When first time visitor connect to the AOS8 Wi-Fi, the controller will issue the radius request, which is a MAC address authentication, to the ClearPass CPPM to authenticate this user. Now, please take note, this request sent to ClearPass CPPM, not sent to ClearPass guest. So once ClearPass CPPM or ClearPass Policy Manager receive the MAC authentication request based on configured policy, CPPM will return the guest log-on row for first time login. When the user opens the browser, it will be redirected to the captive portal. Now, so when the user get redirected by the AOS8 to the ClearPass guest, right, it will be directly go to the ClearPass guest landing page. So from there, the user will see the the login form with the key in the username and password. So once the user hit login, the now this is the difference in the server initiate workflow. When user hit login, the authentication request submit or send directly to the ClearPass guest. Right now, different with the controller initiate. When user hit login, the request send to ClearPass guest, and then the ClearPass guest will push down the script to the browser, and then the browser will submit to the controller, and then controller will issue or initiate the radius request to the CPPM for authentication. But for the server initiated workflow, the request sent directly to the ClearPass get login and it get authenticated by ClearPass get login. Sorry, by the ClearPass guest module. So if the user login with the right correct username and password, the ClearPass guest will communicate with the ClearPass CPPM to issue a radius COA to the controller, right? So this radius COA, it can be to disconnect the user and force the user to reconnect. But this workflow it have the disruption, so it's not really the best workflow for user experience. So in this lab, we will do is when the ClearPass guest work together with the ClearPass CPPM to return the COA, we will do the COA row change. So we will return the COA, but we change the row, right? Instead of we do the message disconnect. So when we change the role, the user session is still there. They will not get disconnect, and then the session is still on. But now the role change from the guest log on to guest role, user or visitor is allowed to access internet, right? So subsequently, when user so-called uh, connect to the Wi-Fi again, so it will be so it will have the MAC authentication sent to the from the controller sent to ClearPass CPPM. And of course, in this case, right, depends on the session catching or on the ClearPass, or if the MAC catching is enabled, then the CPPM can return to the controller the guest role instead of the guest logon role again, right? And then user continue to have the internet access. So this is one of the uh, the the different of the initial workflow compared to the controller uh, initiated workflow, right? So the key point when we need to use this workflow is that when the user they don't have the public cert installed on the controller, right? The user only have the public cert installed on the ClearPass. Then this is a workflow. This workflow is the best for that use case. Or when you want to integrate the ClearPass with the third-party Wi-Fi, for example, with the Cisco Wi-Fi, right? Um, then the Cisco Wi-Fi only support the so-called server initiated workflow. That's how it works. Okay, so let's move to the SSID. Same, we will leverage on the same SSID, right? No different. But in this case, the way we do it is that we will configure under the so-called the landing page of the um, controller initiate, right? We can add one more page, so-called server initiate, or we just replace the current controller initiated workflow, and then we change it by server initiated workflow, and and then we will test, right? So this is a IP address and credential that you can use to access to your CPPM and Wi-Fi. All right, so let's go. Configure VMM. So we already done the cluster setting for VMC. So we already done the radius setting. Right now we need to create the user role. Okay. Let's go to the Wi-Fi. Log into your Wi-Fi. Go to your VMM. Okay. Aruba add 123. Okay, now we are doing the server initiated workflow, so we should create something different. So instead we use the so-called GRP8 guest role. Now we will call a role is GRP8 guest server initiate SI. Okay. Right. So basically the policy of this role more or less is the same with the guest. It means that we will allow the DHCP, we will allow the DNS, and then we deny access to internal, deny internal, and we allow internet access means allow all. So this is the order of the policy to achieve that requirement. Okay. All right. Now, if you notice here, right, we are using the group 8 guest lock-on, and the current workflow we are doing the controller initiate. So we can modify this current workflow, the current role we have here, and we will use this same group 8 guest log on, and we will use it under the server initiated workflow, right? To do that, we go to the ClearPass, log into CPPM, and duplicate. We should have two tabs for the CPM and one tab for the guest, the ClearPass guest. Okay, so the key point. Now we go to authentication, L3 authentication under the Wi-Fi, under CPPM, right? Now the thing we need to change here is the login page. This login page it is for the controller initiated. So later we change this one to server initiated, right? And we will test it out. So under the guest manager of the ClearPass guest, go to configuration, web login. Now we will create the new Captive Portal and we use a server initiated. So we just need to duplicate this old page, right? And then we go and modify. Go here and modify. This one is will be the test case number 3, right? Case number 3. And we change this one to server initiated. Now, please take note that we are using the server initiated, so it is very important to make sure that the COA is working, right? If COA is not working, the server initiated workflow will not work. All right. Okay, so the rest other setting we leave it default pre-auth check local because we are using the local account on guest on the ClearPass guest, right? Um, Use the same Galleria skin. Now, the difference here is that for a server initiated workflow, we need to allow enough time for the controller and the ClearPass to communicate to change the role. So normally for locking delay, we should change to 5 to 7 seconds. So in this case, let's go with 7 seconds delay here. Save and reload. All right, so we already done the new so-called Captive Portal with the server initiated workflow launch to test. All right, so it's there, same setting. Okay, now we launch again, right? So you notice, right? This page, right? The only thing different is that it is it have the um you know the part 2A use case 3. So we just need to change the from 2 to 3 on the Wi-Fi setting. It means that from login page from this one to change to test on the server initiated workflow, we change this one from 2 to 3 and we submit. All right. And at the same time, we can go to the ClearPass ClearPass CPPM, check at our policy, right? So take note that now we plan to use a different role when we return. So that's why from here, right, we need to use something different. So instead we return the role called role number 1. Here we copy the new one, we call it, create a new one, we call it see. This is the guest open. Oh, sorry, this is the Captive Portal role. So we don't need to create a new Captive Portal role. The only role we need to change is the after user authenticated, which is under here. Right, copy. Yeah. Right, let me take a look. Okay, so the role we are using here is GRP8 guest, right? Okay, so let's see what other role we are using here. Okay, GP8 get. All right. So down here we will this is OWE row. This is a bit funny. We don't have that row configured down here. Okay, so let's take a look at our setting again. Okay, let's create that too. Do is guess open. So actually this one it should be the so I just want to make sure that the row we created is consistent, right, for testing purpose. So down here we will just allow DHCP, right, allow DNS and allow deny access internal and allow any. Okay, so open, we do the same. DNS allow, we allow DHCP, deny access internal, and allow all. Right. All right, so let's do this way, right? We don't need to create the new one. We just leverage on this row after user. So we just change the row based on the SSID instead of the based on the page, the workflow we configured, right? Okay, so let's go here and we see the enforcement profile we configured. Let's remove this one. Now, so for the server initiate, when the user hit login, right, it will not use this service because of it will not be the so-called readers request sent from the controller, but it will be the application request sent from the ClearPass guest, right? So let's test it out and see the detail. Let me go to the client number 7. Right, so please take note that now we are already chained to the server initiated workflow. So if we log into the client and we do the test, we will see the workflow totally different, right? Okay, so this is the ClearPass. Let me disconnect. Do the COA. All right, let's reconnect to this one. See what happened. Okay, now it hit this one and the controller just returned this row, gets logged on row, right? However, the naming convention here is a bit confusing. Confusion. So we should not name it in this case like the case 2 CP controller initiate. So we should do this, right. We should create the new service for this one. So we just go here and copy, right, and we go here. In fact, right, we can just leave it the default and then we just rename this one to case 3 and we change this to server initiated, right, authentication. The rest are the same, we just leave it there, right, and we reorder, we move this one on top. So now it's supposed to hit this service. Okay, so let's try to do the change status and submit. Issue the COA. So actually now, by doing this way, right, we are testing the COA and make sure that the COA is working. And now we see it hit this one, right? In fact, the policy are the same. We just need to do this. We just need to do this configuration, right? And to it is easier for us to see. Okay. So when we see this one, it means that the client already get into this login log-on page. And this is the page the user will see. So let's see what happened if the user key in the username and password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Log on, log in. It say invalid username and password, right? Go to here. Now you see that in the controller initiated workflow, when the user hit login, we will see the readers request sent from the controller to the ClearPass CPPM. But in the server initiate, we see the web authentication request sent by who? It's sent by, this one is sent by the ClearPass guest to the CPPM, right? So it means that we need to create a new web authentication service to cater for this one, okay? So we go to here under this one and we look for the ClearPass on no. Web authentication. Web authentication. Okay, this is the one, right? So let's try with this web authentication service. Great. All right. So we go here and we just name it like this one is to a case use case 3, right? And we name it is a server initiated captive portal web login authentication. Um, just leave it in by guest user repository, right? Because of this one we authenticate against the um, guest user database. Role leave it there. Enforcement policy. Now for enforcement policy, right? This is a COA policy, so basically we just leave it default. Later we get to change this one later, right? And that's all. And save. Move this one on top. Okay. So basically, right, this one it will meet any authentication host type is check type is authentication. So let's go here and hit again one more time. See what happened. All right, so it is logged in now. It means that this service is working, but let's see the policy we done is correct or not. Basically, right, when we hit login, the ClearPass CPPM it will return the COA to the controller to force the user to disconnect, right? So when the user disconnect, it will expect the user to reconnect, which is this one. And when the user reconnect, it should expect the user, the ClearPass to return a row, which is allowed the user to get access, right? But like I mentioned, this workflow, it is very disruptive and we have to change the setting from this map authentication workflow here, right? So another way is when the user hit login, we will return the COA but not disconnect like this case you see here. So we return the COA with the row change, right? So to do that, we go to here and we will define the new enforcement profile, right? We go here and we add um, radius dynamic authorization, right? 3A. Let's say now we will do the guess. What will be the row we return? Okay, so we have two row here. Group 8 guest open and group 8 guest okay. So we just define grp8 guest open. This is the first one. Okay, copy this one and choose the Aruba Wi-Fi, Aruba wireless chain user row, right? And we under the filter ID, put it the row we want to return to the controller here and click save. So it is here, right? So we have to create a second one, the same policy for the when the user connect to the enhanced open SSID. Go to here, the here, A O W E, right? And copy this one, paste it under here, save. So we already so now we already have the enforcement policy. So we can go to here, and we will do the so-called the enforcement policy. So we need to create a new enforcement policy. We name it like right enforcement policy web org. So down here we just check the tips row equal to open. So if they have this row, right, then we will return the COA row chain called open, right? Okay, so if the row is tips row equal OWE. Then we return the COA to change the row to OWE. It means that user connect to guest, group 8 guest OWE, right? Um, so save this policy. Oh, we have to choose the default. So for default one, we just choose the Aruba wireless termination, right? And save. And under here, we choose this one. All right, so if you notice, right, we need to do one more step is that we need to define, to, to create the row mapping. Because down here, we are using the row to enforce a policy based on the SSID. So under the row here, we need to have the row mapping, right? So basically, we can reuse the row mapping we have in case one, all right? But I don't want to use this name. I just go to um, row mapping, right, for case number one here, and I just copy and I rename it to become the new row mapping of this case number three, right? Web op. All right, so I go back here to service, go to this one, and then choose the new row mapping. Okay, so it means that if the user connect to different SSID, go to group 8, WP2 enterprise, then they will have this row. When they have this row, they will have this policy, right? It means that we return the correct row. Okay, so what else we need to do here with authentication, row mapping? All right, that's all. We save. Um, Now, we also need to check at the MAC authentication, right? So for MAC authentication, we are doing the same way. We also leverage on the row to be able to return this, right? Now, one thing, when we do this web authentication, right? If in this case, we just change the row, but after that, if the user reconnect, right, they will have to re-authenticate again to the Captive Portal because we don't have any so-called the MAC caching policy here at all. So we will do that enhancement later, but now let's do the quick test, right? So let's go here and we check what is the row we see for this user now. Uh, so basically they will have this one, guest log on row, right? We log in with the guest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and accept term and condition, log in. You see this, there's two login line is a bit not so friendly. Later we will optimize and we fix this one, okay? All right, so what happened, right? It's have some issue, okay? So let's see what are the issue. We go here and we check again, right? Now, as I mentioned, when for this current workflow, right? Let me check again, right? It still hit this this message disconnect or terminate session, which is not expected. In our configure policy, we should expect it to hit this one, right? But now we need to see why it never hit this one, right? So let's take a look at the policy. Now you notice, right? Under the policy, we don't have the attribute called the Aruba ESS ID name to do this row mapping. So that's the reason why, right? We don't have the row. You see that we have the row group 8, right? Guest open or guest OWE. That's the reason why it always use the default policy, default enforcement profile. So means for now, right, we have to find the attribute that we can leverage on, right, to test. It means that now we have to use an attribute called application web login ESSID. Let's try if, let's see if we can try if we can use this attribute, right? So the row mapping, we add the new row mapping policy. We see application, right? Application web login URL. Application ClearPass. So look like we can't use this attribute, right, in our settings, so we have to find something else. All right, so something else we can try to find is, let's try to see this one, page name. Okay, ClearPass, and what other attribute we can have, we can use here? So page name should be under here, but let's see what else, right? Page name is there. So we can use attribute called page name, right? And it can contain this one. No, let's do equal, right? Exact match. Now the challenge here is that when the user have this one, we can only leverage on the page name we configure under the guest ClearPass guest to be able to do the row mapping. So for now, right, uh, let's stick to this one first, and then we will map it to the guest open first, and we try to see what else we can do. Okay, save. So now it means that even user connect to guest open or guest OWE SSID, they still have the same row called guest open row. It means this this policy will never be enforced, right? So let's see whether we can do something, right? Okay, so when we do this, we come back again and we try to log in again. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now it's working, right? So let's see the row mapping, whether it's worked correctly or not. So you notice here, right? This one, it just do the row chain. There are no, there are no COA to disconnect the user. So that's why we don't see, after this web app, we don't see any so-called MAC authentication requests come from the controller at all. And if we go to the page, right, we will see it change the row to this row, group 8 guest open, right? Now, the thing here is, one of the limitation we are facing now is that, what if the user connect to guest OWE, right? Let's try that. Now connect to this one, see what happened. Okay, we see the cutting portal again. That's because of the ClearPass will return the cutting portal profile, right? When user connect to that, this is the one. Okay, now let's try to log in to the same guest account. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Log in. Okay, so it's working, right? But what from the visibility, right? What we see, the row returned by the ClearPass is still the user, the old one. That's because from the row mapping perspective, it always map to this, to this row. And under the policy, it say that if the user have this row, it will always use this policy, right? So now how can we achieve the, our requirement when we want to say that if it is the row need to be follow the SSID, right? Okay, so from there, right, let's try to do this way. Let's try this way. So we need to find a way to be able to use, right, the attribute, different attribute in our enforcement policy. So in this case, let's try this. Let's try whether we can use this attribute under our application web login URL, right? Application cannot, right? It means that we can't. So what else um, we can do? Look through this attribute, right? The list of the attribute. Look like we we not we don't have. any other option, right, to be able to use this attribute. Okay, so one of the way we need to we can do in this case is that when it do the MAC authentication, right? So instead we return this row. So now we have to define, we need to have two different so-called guest log on row, and from two different guest log on row we can have different captive portal, and when we have different captive portal we can have different policy, right? So that is the idea. So how can we do that? So let's go to controller, go to configuration. Now let's create the new row, right? Guest log on. Um, this is the current row. I will create a new one called grp8 guest log on. Let's name it one. So or owe, right? So guest log on will return the normal the normal row, but log on owe it will return the owe, right? It means when user connect to owe, it will return to this row. Okay, so the same we will allow DHCP, DNS. We allow DHCP. We allow CPPM, right? And the last one will be the captive portal. Okay, save. All right. Okay, so we have this new role for applied for OWE, right? So under the authentication, right? L3 authentication, captive portal, this one, we will create a new captive portal profile, right? But before we do that, we go to the guest um, captive portal to create the new captive portal. So we go to here, we duplicate, and we rename it. We name this page called OWE, right? Okay, the rest are the same. So one of the thing we can optimize our setting is that we remove this one, so we don't need to keep this, right? So and save and reload. We do the same for another one, so it will not show the two line of login, right? So remove this one, save. Okay, so that's how we do this, right? So now we have two different page. We launch this one, and this will be the URL. So under the Wi-Fi configuration of this new page, we submit a new one because CPPM CPOWE. Save. Right. So under this OWE, right, we will use this portal login. We use the OWE, the new page we created, right? Test to make sure Control C, Control V, make sure it works. Yes, it works. So basically, it's the same page, but we just use different login name. So we can use that one to differentiate the when user connect to different SSID, right? Okay, so you see here we have the CP map to the this captive portal, and we have this new one map to the new captive portal, right? Server group is the same as ClearPass. Go back to the role under the new one we configure here, show advanced, right? Under the more authentication. Now captive portal profile we choose this one. Remember the default one it will choose the if you go to here, right? It will be the CP. It means this one default map to the open, right? This the new one we create is map to OWE. Okay, so let's do a test again, right? But before we do the test, we need to remove the caching, right? So we go to endpoint database, this guy, and we remove the MAC caching. Basically, we haven't write any MAC caching yet, right? So go to here, check the policy again, row mapping. Right now we can use it to do the row mapping. Now, so we go here and modify and go to here, edit rule. So actually not really edit rule, copy rule, right? So here we go and we say that OWE, right? Then we give them into this row. Okay, save. Then under that row, we have this one, right? New page. Then it could be mapping into the correct policy, right? Okay, so let's try again. Let's issue a COA to kick the user out. Remember, for COA, you can only do it from the Raiders authentication. You cannot do from the web authentication. Okay. Okay, so we see the page. Let me off the sound. Go to here. We see the login page. Now we are connected to the guest OWE, right? So we should expect the controller show guest OWE, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 login. So now you notice that there are no more two line of login in, right? Because we already removed that one from the Conti portal. Done. Okay, so go back to the controller and we check the client. Now you notice that, let's see, hang on. Let's see from the ClearPass. That's not expected. We should see it return the policy call. No, it's the wrong one, right? So it's still something not right. Let's see here. Okay, you see here the page is still showing, the page name is still showing this one, which is not expected at all. We okay. It means that under the MAC authentication, we haven't changed this one yet, right? So for MAC authentication, when user login, right? So let's see the MAC authentication perspective, right? When user go to the page, okay, this one, it have the row mapping, right? So we need to have two separate policy here also. So we say that if the user and the tips, right, row equal open, then we return this one, right? But if copy rule equal to OWE, then we return the OWE gets logged on, right? Oh, so we haven't configured that one yet, so just leave it there. We go there to configure the guest log on, so under enforcement profile. Right, so we can reuse the one we have in the use case 2, the guest log on here, right? Copy, and we define a new policy for this one. This one we call it log on OWE. This is the new role we created under the controller, right? Go to controller here, and then we see the role we created here, right? So go to here, attribute, return this guest log on OWE. Okay, save. All right, so now under the MAC authentication, we need to make sure that if connect to different SSID, that we will return a different guest log on row. So under here, edit rule, we return the guest log on OWE row, right? Okay, so this is what we supposed to do. Save and save. Right, so let's try again. We issue another COA and we see the new coming MAC authentication, whether it's the ClearPass return to the correct row or not. Now, something happened, right? Let's see. Somehow it's denied, right? It means that let's check a row. Oh, it doesn't have the row that we supposed to map into the SSID. So let's take a look at that. Okay, policy. All right, so it is here. My authentication, right? Let's see again. Right. Under row mapping, we are doing this one for row mapping. Authentication row mapping, right? So let's check the radius request come in. We are radius Aruba So group is guess OWE. Okay, so let's do this. Let's loosen the policy. Instead, we do the equal. Let's try to do content. Right, content. This one's supposed to work, right? Save. And enforcement profile, right? We see the policy enforcement here and there. All right, let's save. Okay, and let's try one more time. It still have 39. All right, so let's see why it never have that row apply at all. So we have this one, right? Come from this IP, land GIP8 guess OWE. Check again. Yep. Okay, it should work. Um, Authorization, we already have that. Let's say at endpoint. Not really necessary, but let's see how. Right. Let me do one more thing also. I go to the endpoint and let me remove the endpoint. Okay, let me totally remove this endpoint to make sure that there's no catching at all. At the same time, I go to the source. Okay, that's all. All right, so let's do another COA. Now let me do this. Right, disconnect and reconnect. COA to disconnect this guy. Try again. Oh, so weird. Okay, let me check if there is any catching. Policy catch. 5 minutes. Okay, so let's see the source. Okay, and guest user repository. 0 second. Let me try one more step. I trigger this one off, on, off, and on. Let me off this controller initial authentication. Okay. All right. Let's try one more time. same issue. Let's try the current open SSID. Yes, open. Connect. Let's see what happened. Okay, so somehow when we reconnect to guest open, it can get this correct row, right? And because of that, it returned the correct guest log on row. So let me try to switch to another one again. This is unusual behavior, unusual issue, right? Connect to this one again, right? Let's see what happened. Strange. This one is matched and it's at the proper row here, right? But somehow this one it do not have that row, right? We see that's not that row. Let's see why. O W E, right? No space. Let's see our row mapping configuration. O W E. Yep. Okay, let me content. Okay, no space. Try again. Okay, so this one it's working. It's returned the correct uh, here. It's returned the correct. It have correct row mapping, right? So that's why it's working. Switch to another one again. All right. So let's see. Now it's work. So somehow you see somehow the policy if we do the full match is not working. So we just match this one. All right. So now we see that it's working and we return the correct row you see here, right? So it already returned the correct row. So that's why we can try to do the test now, right? Guest login 1 2 3 4 5 6 accept login. So now it will log in, and if we later we take a look at the ClearPass, right? It should return the OWE row instead of the open row, right? Here, take a look. Because of now it have correct row, so output will be this OWE row, right? It means that if we take a look at the controller we will see it's show correct row already, right? Okay, so there's one more thing. There's one more thing is that for now, if the user disconnect to the Wi-Fi, it means that if you purposely clear the session by issue the COA on the controller to clear the user session, then the user have to relog in again. That's because of there's no MAC caching attribute we write to endpoint database. So you see, so as long as you do that right, the user have to relog in again, right? So this is very unfriendly user experience. So to improve this one, we will write the endpoint attribute, the MAC caching attribute right into the endpoint database when it do the web app. Similar way we do on for this, right? So under here under enforcement, we add um, this policy, the MAC caching policy, uh, guess MAC caching, right? And do the same for this MAC caching. So once we do this, right, every time user log in, hit login, it will do the web app, and then at the same time, the ClearPass CPPM will write down the attribute into the endpoint database of that user. So as you can see from here now, right, there's nothing here, even user login. But now let's try one more time. We 1 2 3 4 5 6. We log in, but now we already turn on the so-called MAC caching policy to see what will happen, right? Now it's login, and at the same time, user the ClearPass will do the MAC caching, right? So cancel here. Look at here. Ah, its MAC caching is working, but under the MAC authentication expiry, we should see the time, right? Right down here, but now we don't see that. We see this is funny, string, something wrong, right? That's something wrong is because of here. So under the enforcement policy, right, we plan to write this one down, and you notice that we are using the term source database. It means that we need to keep term source database as an authorization source under this service, right? Part 2A, user case 3, CP server initiated web login. So we have to go to that service, this one, here, right? Under service, we turn on the authorization. And under the authorization, we turn on the term source. Right? Of course, at the same time, we need to turn on the endpoint repository to allow it to write to endpoint database. Right? So at the same time, if you want to get some attribute from guest user database, you can add the user here also. Right? So that's it. Uh, okay, so we can try to COA again. Now, if we do the COA, it still bring the user back to the login page because, like I said, there's no MAC caching, right? Oh, surprisingly, let me see. How come it's got this row, MAC caching row? Let me check here again. Check the endpoint database. So look like our condition, we don't check the time, right? Let's say MAC caching policy do not check the time, so that's why it works. Anyway, we need to fix that one, right? To fix that one, we just remove, remove, remove this all MAC caching policy, and we issue the COA again, right? To bring the user back to the login page. So come back here, we see it, and now we can log in, and this time it should work, right? So guess one scp.com 12345 and we will log in. Okay, so while waiting for it to log in, right, we can go to the ClearPass, we check what the attribute return. So down here we see is return correct one, and now we have the correct time, right? And date and time, and we see it's return the correct COA, right? User have access internet. Now what happen if we purposely issue the COA? Means we disconnect the user. So now because we have the MAC caching, right? If valid for 1 day, so user we just the ClearPass we just return tell the controller to move the user to this row directly without asking the user go to Khatib portal. It means the user still can go to internet, right? No issue. You see there. Okay, so the next one is we test the second SSID to make sure it works also. So we disconnect this one and make sure we remove the MAC caching policy, right? So nothing catch here, and we connect to the open. Okay, so this is the Khatib portal. We log in again, guest login, and password 123456. Hit login. Okay, 7 seconds. Actually, we can fine tune this one to 5 seconds. It should work. Okay, login. Uh, let's check the MAC caching. Okay, it's get updated. And under the policy, now we see that it set a correct row, right? And output, it returned the correct row. It means that from the Wi-Fi perspective, if you notice, the row user will see it show to the guest open, right? So yeah, that's all. We have done the testing of this use case number 3, and we show how the server initiated workflow look like, and how does it go, and what are differences compared to controller initiate, right? And that's all for this session, and thank you for your watching.